I'm here today with Professor Andrew Blick, a professor and director of History and Policy at King's College London. Professor Blick flew all the way here from London yesterday to speak at WNL tonight about the meaning of Brexit, Britain's decision to leave the EU this past June. Professor Blick has also worked in the British Parliament and the Prime Minister's office. Professor Blick, thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, so why has the election of Donald Trump been compared to Brexit?
I think the main reason for that is that a vote went away which was not necessarily anticipated, that the opinion polling didn't necessarily predict, and it also meant that a lot of people voted away which many established authority figures, many of the members of what might be called the political establishment, didn't want it to go, that there was a mass of almost groundswell against what people felt they were being told to vote for, and they actually voted against that option. And many of those people came from further down society than those who were telling them to vote a different way. So there's a sense that there's been a kind of upsurge against established political arrangements in both cases.
Okay. And what has been Britain's reaction to Mr. Trump's election?
I think that in Britain it's largely accepted that it's up to the Americans who they want to elect their president. There's no doubt about that. It's not directly our business. However, there is a sense of slight shock, although also a sense that actually something similar happened here with Brexit, so it's not come completely out of the blue. But also there is a sense of uncertainty, because although we accept, as I've said, it's up to the Americans who they want to elect president, on the other hand, Trump is slightly more of an unknown quantity than we're generally used to. We know broadly what we're getting, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. With Trump, he's more of an outsider figure, obviously hasn't been directly involved in politics before, and made some policy pronouncements that we're very interested to see how they might actually be delivered in practice.
So what are your thoughts on how this election will influence America's international credibility?
A lot remains to be seen on how Trump actually goes on to conduct himself in office. Clearly, some of the things he said during the campaign could be seen as very controversial internationally, and were seen in that light. There's no question about that. And many people in Europe, including in the UK, were worried about some of what he was proposing, as they were in other parts of the world. However, we'll actually see what happens in practice. We'll wait to see when he actually gets into the White House how he operates and how he actually deals with the other forces within the American Constitution that he still has to negotiate with if he's going to get everything he wants done achieved. So partly we'll wait and see how he actually behaves in office before we know whether his actions are going to alienate the US.
So some Americans are worried there could be an increase in violence and hate crimes with the election of Mr. Trump. How extreme were people's reactions to Brexit, and should Americans be bracing for any similar conflicts?
I certainly hope there won't be an increase in hate crimes. There is evidence that following the Brexit vote in the UK, there was some kind of upturn in hate crimes, that some people regarded a vote for Brexit as a vote to remove foreigners they didn't want being in the country from the country. So there is some evidence that happened. It'd be nice to think it's not going to happen in the US.
So Brexit has alienated Britain from EU members like Germany. And Mr. Trump's statements indicate he may be alienating some of our trading partners like Mexico, China, and as well as members of NATO. If this happens, do you think there will be incentive for the US and Britain to team up, maybe develop stronger ties and promote mutually beneficial policies?
Certainly, I think both countries will be looking at their options. Obviously, certain things are up for grabs in the UK as regards what our trading policy will be going forward in the future, and the same for the US. However, we've got to be realistic about this. The UK has not even left the European Union yet, and it hasn't even opened the negotiating process to leave. It'll be a long while before we know exactly what kind of exit deal we're getting, assuming we do leave at all. So that's some way off. And as far as the US goes, yes, the UK is potentially a significant trading partner, but we're certainly not as large an economy as the European Union will still be, even without us in it. So there's the EU, and certainly China will be a more significant operator. So yes, the UK will be something that the US wants to look at in terms of its future trading relationships, particularly if we're leaving the European Union. But these trade deals take a long while to negotiate, and we're not the largest player in the field at the moment anyway.
People like Nigel Farage predicted that Brexit would be the first of many upcoming political upsets. What predictions do you have about what could be the world's next biggest upset?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens, for instance, in the French presidential elections. I suspect we'll get one of the mainstream parties will win there, but there certainly are potentially more upsets in store. We do seem to be seeing a rising tendency towards populism in politics, that figures, charismatic figures or populist movements that seem to be promising things which the existing system are said to be failing to deliver seem to be actually winning elections, whereas in the past they may have not won but got some kind of vote. Now they actually seem to be winning, as happened with Brexit, as happened with Trump recently. So certainly there seems to be a wider tendency than any one country going on around the world towards these kind of results, but it's hard to know exactly where it will happen next and what exactly it will mean in the long run.
Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the viewers?
No, I think that's all I've got to say for now.
Okay, great, thank you so much. For the
Pleasure.
Rockbridge Report, I'm Julia Gazelle, and this is Professor Andrew Blick.